This is the Enjoyer Podcast. I'm your host, James Dixon. But for the grace of God, July 13th, 2024 would have become one of those infamous days in American history. You know some of the others. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. November 22nd, 1963, the Kennedy assassination. September 11th, 2001, 9/11. If that bullet landed an inch in the other direction, President Donald Trump would be dead by now, and we would no longer be a country. We'd certainly no longer be America. We were an inch away from making the worst kind of history. But by God's grace, we were given another chance to save this republic, if we can keep it. But we have to start by saving ourselves and by getting our own minds right. On Saturday, the day of the shooting, Democrats were mealy-mouthed. They didn't even want to call it a shooting at first, or an assassination attempt. They didn't quite know what to say. On Sunday, they got their story straight. One of the more insightful remarks actually came from our governor, Gretchen Whitmer. On X, Whitmer released a lengthy statement. A portion of it read, "We have lost the plot when it comes to the way we talk to each other and about each other. No matter your age, you've been impacted by this trend. This vitriol has infiltrated our lives. It's broken relationships and marriages, friendships and families. Almost everyone can think of someone they don't talk to anymore because of politics. I've met with Michiganders across the state who are living these consequences every day. There's just a deep-rooted sense of anger and distrust." It was the first part of the second paragraph that hit me the hardest. I've lost many friends over the years because of politics and how outspoken I can be about politics. I've lost a few just this weekend, just in the day since the Trump shooting, and some of them are people I've known since high school or college. We're always changing as people, and it stands to reason that as we change with time, we might change in ways that are no longer compatible with some of the friends we have. But when I think of the friends I've parted ways with over politics, especially the ones from this weekend, I wonder if we were ever compatible. One of those former friends was a college fling from many moons ago. After Trump was shot, she called the shooting a con by a con man. That was all I needed to see. Despite the fond memories of our past, despite her regularly dropping feet pics from her travels, I was done. I see that kind of thing and I'm done. Now you're just somebody that I used to know. The whole thing made me wonder, were we ever really friends? We like to smoke, sure, drink, hang out, hook up. But what else? And it's no coincidence, I think, that as we get into the adult years of life and out of the protective bubble of college, that friendship wasn't what it was, to the point where I haven't seen her in the flesh or talked to her on the phone in many years. I guess it was never that deep. These are the 4 takeaways from America's worst weekend in at least 2 decades. First, in the immortal words of The Wire's Avon Barksdale, stop playing those f***ing away games. When you go to college, you're surrounded by beautiful young women and motivated young men. It's a competitive atmosphere. A lot of guys, though, arrive in college without any idea of how to talk to women. They spent so much time in high school studying, they forgot the social part of the game. So they arrive on a campus, there's all kinds of women your age, they're hot, they're all over the place, but you don't know how to talk to them, how to meet them, or how to date them. Rather than explore themselves and listen to the sound of their heart and follow it to the life they want and meet the women they want at that place. These are the kind of guys who take a women's studies class or a yoga class hoping to meet women. Because they have no interest in what's actually being taught, they stay on the shallow end of the pool. They become a repeater of slogans. You ever have that friend randomly tell you that "Baby, It's Cold Outside" was about rape culture and run down the reasons why? That's who I'm talking about. Men without chins act as men without values. They think that if they stay quiet, only speaking up to bleat out the approved slogans, they'll be safe. And if they play their cards right, they can partake in this sexual revolution they've heard so much about, but never experienced themselves. The problem is, the friends you make when you're not being yourself aren't your real friends. They can't accept you because they've never met you. They can't accept you because you don't accept you. What they've met is a representative of you who bends over backwards in hopes of getting his on the back end. With these kind of people, you can be their friend, but they can never be yours, and they never have been yours, and that's what we need to understand. So, with the case of my college friend, this was not really an away game. I don't play those. The James Dixon you hear on this podcast is the James Dixon you read on Twitter. Follow me at Down I 75. And the James Dixon you'd bend elbows with when grabbing a coffee or beer. Same guy. So, no, I didn't suppress myself to keep that friendship alive, but I can't say I held a high standard over the years. I can't say that's the first thing like that she said and others have said. And hey, the memories, the feet pics, the good times, uh, it's all excusable until one day it's not. Why be hardcore when it's someone you haven't actually seen in years? But the Trump shooting made one thing very clear to me. This is a time for choosing who we are, who we want to be, and who we want to be with. I lost my mom 1 year ago this week. I learned that life is shorter and more precious than we could ever imagine. Why would you waste even a moment of it with people who believe that politics should invade every aspect of life? For 50 years now, feminists and the broader left wing of politics have told us that the personal is political. In the 2020s, the purpose of that psyop could not be clearer. What we have now coming up through the schools and on the roof of where Trump was shot is a mutant generation. Gen Z is a mutant generation. They're the type that struggles with eye contact. They're the type who will text a friend who's sitting there in the same room. They're the type who will do anything to avoid making a phone call. And so on the male side of this generation, you have weak men like Ethan Crumbley, the Oxford High School shooter, or Thomas Crooks, the shooter of President Trump. These boys were molded and groomed to be the losers they are. Socially withdrawn, oddly skinny, not a moment of physical activity. If I had to take an over-under on the combined number of girls Ethan Crumbley and Thomas Crooks had kissed before their shootings, I'd set it at 0.5, and I'd take the under. Their pictures look so similar. I wonder how similar their medicine cabinets would look. I wonder where those voices in their head came from. On the female side, why do we have so many young girls claiming they're trans or queer or asexual? Why are there pretty little flags for every type of sexuality? Why does a generation with no actual sexual experiences have so many sexual labels? And why haven't any of them thought to ask that question? I'm 40. I'm old. I have gray hair. And I'm old enough that back in my day, we actually got an education at school. Kids these days seem to be getting more of a re-education. They'll come home unable to read, write, think critically, or do math, but they can explain why dad's racist for telling an off-color joke, or sexist for noting that women Secret Service agents aren't remotely up for the job. The real grooming that happens in the classroom is not sexual for the most part. It's the conversion of bright young minds and futures into gray protesters, always reliable to repeat a slogan, hold a sign, or break a window. That's on the male side. On the female side, they're a reliable vote. Between the pussy hats and the abortion is on the ballot rhetoric of every campaign season, single women have been driven to hysteria. Black women have long found comfort in the arms of Uncle Sam, and white women are joining them there. And now it's single women as a whole who view their lives as a marriage with the federal government, who view the most important thing in life as this policy or that policy passing in Washington. No normal person thinks that way. You'd only think that way if you were groomed to do so. If you were told that evil white men would rape you and force you to have the baby, you'd probably shave your head and be crazy too. But that's exactly what our young women are taught. These days, you don't need MK Ultra to produce this type of hysteria. Just turn on MSNBC. The war on men and the war on women have both been won, and they've been won so long and so decisively, we don't even debate their existence anymore. Years ago, you might have. But now it's pretty clear. They've done a number on us. We've been divided against each other, men versus women. Women have watched other women say, "I don't need no man," for decades on TV and in their music. Men are now following suit with the men going their own way movement. These are two sides of the same coin. These are the people who've swallowed the poison of division. There can be no winners in the battle of the sexes, only losers. It's no wonder that in these divided times, there's more trans people than ever. What is trans if not for the battle of the sexes fought within a single body? Gen Z is the incel generation. They've been groomed to be this losers who hate life, themselves, and their country. They've been groomed to shoot schools, then tweet about it. Their programming is our greatest danger. I'd advise you to stay away from people raising these kinds of kids. Stop playing away games. If they're not someone you would fully embrace as a neighbor or invite to your dinner table right now, I'm not talking about 20 years ago, cut that thread. See, most people don't get this, but I found, especially recently, especially this year, I found there is a great danger in the half opened door. The mind reads the half open door as open and assumes the friendship is still active, even though it's not. What if you closed that half open door yourself? If you did, you'd open up room for the people who should be in your life. The 2024 version of you needs 2024 people around you. But too many of us are making 2024 decisions with a 2004 roster. I'm as guilty of that as anyone. We have to reevaluate this, and you've been given the perfect chance. John 15, 1 and 2 talks about the true vine. It reads, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. The answer is clear. Cut off those branches that bear no fruit. We've talked about on this podcast about how growth requires sacrifice. This could be an easy sacrifice for you to make. Get these people out of your life who have no reason to be there. Maybe it's kind of a vestigial tale of a friendship. Maybe it's who you were at one point, but it's not who you are now. Close those doors. Seriously, end it today. It doesn't have to be violent, and it's not inherently a problem to move on from people. I am always and actively looking for reasons to move on from people, and you've just been given plenty. Listen to what people say. Listen to what they don't say. Watch their demeanor. Watch their behavior. And anyone who thinks it was a good thing that a former president got shot should have no place in your life. Second, while Donald Trump lives, the late replacement theory is dead. It's gone. It's done. A week ago, today, every big name Democrat in America hoped to replace Joe Biden on the November ballot. After the shooting of Donald Trump, Gretchen Whitmer wouldn't take the Democratic nomination if they begged her to take it. Whitmer's never lost an election. Playing the sacrificial lamb was never her style. In the 2014 governor's race, Whitmer declined to join the ticket of Democrat Mark Schauer. He was facing a Republican incumbent, Rick Snyder. Whitmer didn't want to book a loss. This proved to be a smart decision, and 4 years later in 2018, she won the governor's race herself. Gretchen Whitmer is not and has never been a lose for the good of the team politician. No good politician is. So if Biden a week ago was a liability that Democrats couldn't afford, today the Democrat nomination is his karma, and it's theirs. In 2020, Democrats presented Biden as a decent old man. He'd restore dignity to the White House. He wouldn't tweet, certainly no mean tweets. He would be a steady hand. That's what we were sold. Instead, the Biden we got as president has been an agent of chaos since day one. He drove up gas prices by cutting off the Keystone Pipeline. He opened up a border, which, when you flood in millions of Americans, let's even assume there's no amnesty. What that flood does in the short term is it floods your labor market and brings down wages. That's why you haven't gotten a meaningful raise in 5 years. There's simply too many Jose's to split up the pie. Biden's plan was to bring our country so low that we'd be forced to build back better and he'd be the one steering it. We've learned that Joe Biden does not love America and he does not view it as a special place. In that sense, he's kind of an extension of the Obama years. In 2008, we were promised a great uniter. But by 2017, when Obama left the White House, we were divided at levels not seen since the 60s. How could that happen? Democrats thought they were installing an unable old man as president. They thought they'd have the run of the place while Biden licked ice cream. And they almost got away with it. But the mechanics of a candidate switch were never great, and now they don't work at all. For 4 years, irony of ironies, America was stuck with the real Biden after electing the fake Biden. Well, for 4 more months, Democrats are stuck with the real Biden after installing the fake Biden. Biden's every failure on the public stage is their karma as a Democratic Party. Americans with eyes and ears and sense will always know that Democrats put America's national security at risk in installing Biden. Third, Governor Whitmer needs to rewrite that memoir. I've talked about this before, but I'll go over it again. The appeal of Whitmer owes really to three basic factors. First, Trump called her that woman from Michigan, and then she flipped it. Yes, Trump has handed out many a nickname over the years, but I can't think of one that's backfired quite like that woman from Michigan. In 4 words, Trump elevated a boring lady with a nasally voice to the national stage. Whether it was fear or disdain that led Trump to talk about Whitmer that way, ever since he did, every woman with the pussy hat has dreamt of the day when Trump and that woman from Michigan would compete on the debate stage against each other. Whether it was fear or disdain that led Trump to talk about Whitmer that way, ever since he did, every woman with the pussy hat has dreamed of the day when Trump and that woman from Michigan would compete on the debate stage. Now we see this will never happen. Second, there's that kidnapping plot. In her memoir, True Gretch, Whitmer uses scare quotes for kidnapping plot, but she uses it to go in the opposite direction. She says it wasn't just a kidnapping plot, it was an assassination plot. It was definitely a compelling story. At least it looked that way until this weekend, until we saw in Butler, Pennsylvania, what a real assassination attempt looks like. It looks like bullets flying at your head with no warning. It does not look like the story Whitmer tells in her book. On page 98, Whitmer says, "While I was upset at learning of the plot, it wasn't because I was especially worried about my safety. I trusted my security detail to protect me." So A, Whitmer says she never felt unsafe. B, earlier in that story, the head of Whitmer's security team had pulled her into a meeting. He told her about the alleged plot, and then he said, her protector, "You are safe and your family is safe." So A, she felt safe. B, she was safe. C, when Whitmer told her daughters about the plot, here's how she told them. "Oh, just so you know, there's a plot to kidnap and kill me, but it's never going to happen, so don't worry about it." On page 102, Whitmer refers to the plot as an apparent kidnapping and murder plot, a most unusual modifier. Well, Governor, was it apparent or was it existent? I'll take her word for it. Apparent is the way to go. D, on page 96, Whitmer refers to Dan Chappell, the FBI operative and the star witness of the trial. Chappell was part of some patriot groups online when he thought the talk was getting a little bit too serious, a little bit too heavy, a little insurrection-y perhaps. He told a cop friend who told him to go to the FBI. Chappell did go to the FBI and they turned him into an operative. Now, what did the FBI do with this information? Did they go to the plotters and say, "Guys, we're watching you. We're watching everyone you possibly could know or talk to. We know what you've had planned. Don't do it because we'll catch you if you try to do it"? No, that's not what they did. Instead, they had Dan Chappell drive them to Whitmer's vacation home and serve as their chauffeur and wet nurse for months. As Whitmer writes of Chappell, he became an FBI informant, and much of what we know about the plot ultimately came from him. This may come as a shock to you if you read the news in Michigan and you're new to the podcast, but there was never a Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot. Whitmer's life was never in danger. This was the FBI stopping a crime that would not have ever started but for FBI resources. The Whitmer kidnapping story was always fake news. I'm so sorry to be the first one to tell you. Right now, Whitmer is in the midst of a national book tour. Fashion stylists are wearing out their fuchsia and pink reserves to keep her outfitted in the best looks. But that whole book tour is premised on Whitmer being bullied by Trump and then victim of a kidnapping plot. Whitmer is a shrewd and smart politician. Surely she knows that claiming to be bullied by the guy who just got shot won't play well right now. And in her heart of hearts, Whitmer has to know that her apparent kidnapping and murder plot looks rather meager compared to an actual, legitimate, 1 inch to the right and history changes assassination attempt. When people want to kill you and actually plan to, that doesn't come with forewarning. It doesn't come with surveillance. The bullet just comes whizzing right at you. The third factor that makes Whitmer exciting nationally is her performance in the 2022 governor's race. After all those bad feelings and ill will from the pandemic, Whitmer won re-election by 11 percentage points. But dig into those details and the win becomes less impressive. Look, I personally am a huge fan of Tudor Dixon, the Republican, the woman who ran against Whitmer in 2022. But by the primary, Tudor was the best of what was left. What was left off the primary ballot was a candidate like James Craig, former Detroit police chief. People forget this, but it was actually when James Craig retired from Detroit Police Department in June 2021 that Whitmer slowed down her COVID orders. With a viable alternative in the race, a black Republican who threatened to pull black votes from Detroit, the madness of Queen Whitmer was forced to subside. Now she had a political future to worry about. Look, things have gone badly in the time since, and James Craig, as much as I like him, will probably never win elected office. But all of Michigan owes him a debt of gratitude for putting the fear into Whitmer, just as she thought she was all-powerful. So of those three factors, flipping that woman from Michigan into a positive is the only thing Whitmer did that actually took any political skill. The kidnapping plot was fake. The 22 election comes with an asterisk. Removed from the fuchsia-colored glasses of the national stage, Whitmer is a full-on Monet. She looks good from afar, no doubt, but don't stand too close. Fourth, we must distinguish between systematic failures and individual acts of talent or bravery or heroism or what have you. If you were inclined to praise the bravery of the Secret Service in protecting Trump after the shooting, not so fast. Don't let this become about that, because that's not what's at issue. And the news, in a perfect world, would help us make these distinctions. And I was pleasantly surprised to see it on Sunday that reporter Grant Schwab of the Detroit News hit this mark perfectly. Schwab's story was headlined, "Ex-Detroit U.S. Attorney. No question Secret Service failed at Trump rally." Schneider was a Trump appointee from 2018 to 2021. And so he explained for the reading public the Secret Service procedures. Schneider said, "The way it works is there are concentric rings, circles surrounding the president, rings of law enforcement. In this case, clearly the rings weren't secure enough. So what's obvious is that the people in the most inner ring near Trump, yes, they acted fast. Yes, they acted with bravery. Yes, they put their body in the path of any bullets there could be. But the fact that they had to in the first place speaks to a systematic failure, and that's why we can't be giving the Secret Service any credit for what happened." Schneider's predecessor in Detroit, Barbara McQuaid, agreed with his assessment. McQuaid said, "It seems to me to have been poor planning, not to have secured a wider perimeter and not to have had someone near those rooftops. What happened in Butler, Pennsylvania was a systematic failure. Witnesses reported spotting the shooter on the rooftop and alerting police for several minutes. Those alerts went ignored and the shooter was able to get shots off. Just because the agents on the ground acted fast doesn't mean the Secret Service did a good job. The Secret Service got there immediately when JFK's head was blown off too. Only problem is they weren't faster than a speeding bullet. So a president died that day and could have died on Saturday. The job of the Secret Service, let's be clear, is to keep you and me and any American, anyone, from firing that bullet in the first place. Once the bullet leaves the gun, all that's left is oops and after-action reports." I compare this to DTE Energy in Southeast Michigan. So as to curry political favor, DTE has burned billions of dollars on wind and solar. It spends some money on tree trimming, but the area has too many trees to cut them all. I mean, a century ago, the biggest industry in Michigan was logging. You're not going to tree trim your way to reliable energy. The only viable alternative is to bury power lines underground so those power lines aren't knocked down by trees. But DTE doesn't have the money because they spent so much money on wind and solar. It's opportunity cost, it's opportunity lost. That's a systematic failure. So no, it's not DTE's fault when a storm hits or when trees fall. It's DTE's fault that the tree falls on a power line rather than that power line being buried underground. When there are mass outages, as there were recently, the people of Southfield were out of power for about 40 hours last month. That's when DTE leadership shifts the focus to its linemen in the field. They tell you about the thousands of linemen who were out in the field, and they tell you that some of them even came from several states away just to help. It's all very heroic. What they don't tell you is that the technology to avoid power outages already exists. Even if you don't bury the power lines, you can make sure that the circuits are served by other power lines that didn't get hit. This technology is called automation, and it's been in use in Chicago for about a decade now. It's a known thing right down I-94. Now, automation doesn't eliminate all outages or the eventual need for repairs, but when power can be returned with keystrokes and you don't have to wait for linemen to eventually get to your neighborhood, it helps. Automation is an example of a system-wide fix, the type of fix that's needed for a system-wide problem. So DTE is exhibit A of what I'm talking about, systemic failures papered over by individual bravery. Linemen are greeted as liberators when they roll down your block to bring the power back. And they should be. They do great work. But those linemen wouldn't be necessary if DTE were structurally sound. Secret Service agents would have needed to hurl themselves in the line of fire if the Secret Service were systematically sound, if no bullet were fired in the first place, which is the real job. What have we learned? First, stop playing those away games. Push out the people who don't fit in your life and make room for the people who do. 2024 should not have the cast from 2004. Second, the late replacement theory is done. The Democrats stuck America with Joe Biden for 4 years, and now the Democrats are stuck with Joe Biden for 4 more months. After 50 years in public service, a peaceful handoff of power on January 20th, 2025 would sure be a nice way to end things for old Joe. I think on that day I'll have some ice cream in his honor. Third, Whitmer needs to rewrite that memoir. First of all, it's thin as hell. Second of all, it's built around an assassination plot that didn't happen. And the victim of that plot is the man who made her a star, Donald Trump. True Gretch was supposed to serve 2 purposes. It was supposed to give Whitmer a line of attack on Trump and election year relevance. Now it does neither. Fourth, there's a big difference between systematic failures and acts of heroism. We have to learn to make these distinctions. Right now, you're inclined to praise the heroic act. It's a good instinct, but it ignores the real truth that if the system were sound, the agents wouldn't need to be heroes. They just need to do their jobs and be effective. Heroes are only needed when systems fail. Until the Secret Service grows beyond the need for heroes, another oops is just a gunshot away.